Alright, as you can see, I made a lot of room on the side to be able to pull the axle shaft, have the car kind of more in the center of the garage, and I'll be able to pull the other car out of here when I need to. So that's the first thing you need to understand, because the axle shaft is going to come out and it's, you know, half the length of the axle. So first thing we're going to do is get the car up in the air, and since we need the rear of the car in the air, I found it kind of easier to lift from here. So I just have the jack under here, and I'm going to lift it right in front of the subframe connector so that I'm not pinching anything. And once I get the back end of the car up in the air, then I'll put the jack under there and then go around the other side and just make sure that we have it secured on jack stands in the rear. Alright, so as you can see, I've lifted up with the jack, and now I'm just going to support it with this jack stand. I'm going to put it right on that box back here. So then I just came around the other side and lifted up on the front as well, just to get this back part in the air. So then now, as you see, we're going to have plenty of room to work here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is remove the wheels, and we're also going to have to remove the brakes, and that way we're going to be able to slide the axle shafts out when we get to that point. Alright, so with the e-brake on, I broke all the lug nuts loose. Now I just have a little impact gun just to kind of speed the process up. Okay, now we'll just take the wheel off, and that'll expose our brake and caliper. Set the wheel aside. Alright, now with the wheels removed, it's a good idea to go and take the drive shaft off. And we're going to take it off where it connects to the axle in the back. Alright, so here we are into the car. We have the drive shaft coming back from the transmission, and this is where it meets the yoke. And to take off these 4 bolts that are on the yoke drive shaft, where they meet up, we're going to use this 12mm, see how it has multiple points in it? We're going to use that because the heads of these are multi-pointed as well. 12mm seems to fit on there just about perfect. And to help us with this, because part of the drive shaft can get in the way, I'm going to use an extension that'll kind of get me past the drive shaft clearance. And also I have one of these U-joint attachments that comes in handy often too, so you can get in there and turn it without using the extension. So here you can see I have the 12mm socket on here. I have an extension to help me clear the drive shaft and a breaker bar. And I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So I'm going to turn it counterclockwise and break this loose. Okay, so now I'm just going to come into the car. I'm going to put the parking brake down, and I'm also going to make sure that the car is in neutral. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn the drive shaft to expose the next bolt right here. And then go back up and just pull the e-brake on the car. Then I'm going to break that one loose, and same thing until they're all loose. Okay, and so now I'm just taking these out now that they're broken loose, and you can have the e-brake off for this part. And just keep spinning it until you get them all out. As you can see here, I'm keeping the lug nuts and the drive shaft bolts and everything kind of together here. What I also like to do is put them in Ziploc bags and label everything, just so that you don't forget where anything goes. But just make sure you keep everything together. Now on the drive shaft there's a painted mark from the factory, and they like you to line it back up. Let's see if I can even still see mine, but basically sometimes you'll find like a yellow dot here and then one also on the drive shaft. And so when you're putting it back, just make sure those match up. Now to remove the drive shaft, I'm just going to pull it forward towards the front of the car, and you'll see how it goes on here. There we go. So now I'm just going to set it down, just kind of let it, it's going to rest on the X pipe a little bit, and that's fine. If you were to pull the drive shaft out of the transmission, you would lose transmission fluid. Now we have the yoke and the pinion nut are exposed, and that's as far as we're going to go with here. But you can see where the drive shaft was, and so when you put it back on, just make sure it matches up to those bolts. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is make sure that the parking brake is not on, so that we'll be able to take the caliper off of the disc. So we're going to take this red part off, and to do that, there's a bolt right here on the back side, and there's another one down low right there. So we're going to take those two bolts off and be able to slide the whole caliper off of the disc. Now I have my 15mm wrench, and I choose not to use my ratcheting ones for this just because, well, you'll see. What we're going to do is put it on the back side of this caliper bracket, and then we're going to hit it with a hammer right on the side just to break it loose. And so since we're going counterclockwise, remember you're looking at the bolt backwards, so we're going to hit it what would appear to be clockwise. And so we're going to do that to break that one loose. Okay, so as you can see, I broke it loose and now it's ready to go. So that's the top one. Now on the bottom one we have a little bit of a complication because you have the brake line. See right here you have the rear emergency brake line that comes over, and it goes right in front of that bolt. Now what I'm going to do now is disconnect the parking brake line. So as you can see, it's a line that comes up through here. There's no fluid in it, you know, it's a cable, and it comes up into this mechanism here. What you can do is kind of put a pry bar here and rotate the assembly, which I don't recommend because the spring actually comes up into here and you don't want it to come undone. Something you might be able to do, which I was just because the brakes were loose enough, grab a pair of pliers and just pull, and you can just pull it right out of this loop, just pull it right out, and then pull the whole housing right here away. So that's how you can undo the brakes. There's also a little C-clip right here that you'll pull out to be able to pull the brake line through that hole. Pull it right on through. So here we are on the top. I'm just going to get this one out and set it aside. And on the bottom, what I've been doing is just going at it slowly with the regular wrench open end, and I've been pushing the caliper towards that way so that it's not eating away at the brake line. So I'm not contacting the brake line by applying pressure against it. So as you can see, this bolt is now not contacting the caliper anymore. It's been completely removed. The one's off at top as well, so now all we have to do is just slide the caliper off of the disc, and we're going to make sure that we either hang the caliper up here with the car where it's not going to hang by the actual brake line, or set it down on like a bucket or something that'll keep it up, but we just do not want to suspend the caliper on its own. So as you can see here, I just zip tied the caliper. Remember, not by the line, that's not doing you any good. Make sure it's actually around the caliper housing here where it's not going to hurt anything. And I just zip tie it up around so that those are not hanging. And this is on the other side of the car. I'm ready just to remove this brake and move on. Sometimes you'll find a little ring right here, like a washer, that just kind of goes over there and holds the disc on. So just make sure you take that off with a screwdriver. Well, here's my first gruesome discovery of the day. The ABS ring has come off. Seems to be part of the problem. Just kind of floating there. Those are pressed onto the axle shaft. And I see a lot of moisture down in there as well, indicating that the pressure from inside the axle might have blown the seal out. See, there's a cap on the axle. It's on the other side, but it's a breathing cap that goes, it's right about here, but on the other side, just like a little peg that sticks up. And it's supposed to depressurize the inside of the axle And if that gets clogged, then you can have pressure buildup and likely do this where it'll blow the seal out. And when I took the fill plug off of the differential just to see if there was, make sure we still had fluid in there, I heard it all depressurize. So, alright, our next step is going to be to remove the rear differential cover. There's 10 bolts here, and the best size that I found that works on those is the 1/2 inch. So here it is, it's just, the fluid's just starting to come out, and I did have to get a screwdriver in there, and you will have to pry into it and kind of go into the cover a little bit and pry back, but just be careful not to pry too much that you end up bending something more than it should. But that's the point, is you just want to kind of open up the bottom of it. I took out all the bolts all the way around, but now the whole thing could potentially just come off, so you want to be careful about that too. But I'm just kind of prying up on the bottom of it to let the fluid out, and the silicone is still holding the rest of it in place. But once you get it pretty much out, you can, and you've loosened it up all the way around, maybe put the screwdriver in over here, at the top, the sides, then give it a few light pounds with a hammer to move the whole thing to break it loose, so you're not prying one spot on it. So here it is, I just pried up kind of on the bottom of that cover until it was kind of coming out pretty good, and eventually, when most of the fluid was off, just kind of pulled the whole cover off by hand. So here we are in the inside of the gears. Got the traction lock and everything, and now there's still fluid that's down here in the bottom. So I'm going to put a plastic bag over my hand, and then I'm going to scoop the rest of that out as well. And I'm just letting it fall right here into my drain pan. Then I have cardboard down after that too. This stuff really smells pretty bad. Alright, so with a bag over my hand, I don't know how well you can see this, I'm just kind of scooping out the fluid that's left in there. Kind of looking it over, and I'm going to be looking for metal shavings or anything that's coming out, but so far so good. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is to get the axle shafts out. There's a post right here. It's running into the traction lock. And we're going to take this out by undoing this bolt that holds it in place. So we'll take that out, slide the pin out, and then we'll be able to push the axle shafts inward. And as we'll turn the traction lock up. And then as you push the axles inward, you'll see the posts will be exposed on the ends of the axle shafts, and we're going to take some C-clips off of it, and that's going to allow us to take the axle completely out. So I'm going to go ahead and take this 8mm wrench and just kind of fit it right over there, and I'm just going to break that loose, remove it, and then slide the pin out. Alright, so I broke this loose, and a little trick is to reach behind, so hold on to the other side where the drive shaft connects to the yoke, and then with the other hand break it loose on this one. So as you can see, this is now loose enough to take out, and it's a pretty long bolt because it's going into that pin like this. So that's what's keeping everything in place. So when you pull this out, make sure you don't lose it, and then next thing we're going to do is pop the pin out. So here's the pin, it's on its way out. I reached up behind the traction lock and pushed on the other end. And now, as I push, you'll see it just starts to come out, and then you just pull it out, and it's pretty slippery from being in there, but this is what that other bolt was in.